was told in no emphatic terms that I was not producer material and that I was never going to be made a producer by Granada. I literally left the room thinking, well,
I'm going to show you, mate. Andy Harries, co-founder and executive chairman of Left Bank Pictures, the production company behind The Crown, The Queen, and many more globally acclaimed shows. Andy has built a career that bridges creativity and commerce, leading teams, scaling productions, and navigating the streaming revolution while staying true to powerful storytelling.
When you have a chance to work with key or great talent, you've just got to put yourself on the line and say, right, let's do this. We went and did a meeting every day for 1 week in LA. And that was HBO, Fox, and Showtime. And then Netflix was on the last day. They all loved the script. I mean, they would lean forward saying, seriously, 100 million for a pile of British history? We basically thought we're going to be going home Saturday or Friday night, actually. I think we were going up on Friday night, empty-handed. They literally bought it in the room. We were looking for 100 million commitment. It nearly didn't happen because there was opposition from the senior management. We had to wait till he went on holiday before we could get it through.
So how did you pull this off, Andy?
Welcome to All About Business with me, James Reed, the podcast that covers everything about business, management, and leadership. Every episode, I sit down with different guests who've bootstrapped companies, masterminded investment models, or built a business empire. They're leaders in their field, and they're here to give you top insights and actionable advice so that you can apply their ideas to your own career or business venture.
Today on All About Business, I couldn't be more delighted than to welcome Andy Harries. He's the co-founder and CEO of Left Bank Pictures, a leading production company. And Andy has produced, among other global hits, The Crown and Outlander. Andy's been CEO for 18 years, and he's planning to become executive chairman in 2026. We'll talk about that in a minute, Andy. But he and his colleagues have won a host of awards, BAFTAs, Emmys, Golden Globes. I think it's fair to say Andy is a TV legend. I'm making him smile, but it's very true. And I can't wait to learn more about your journey and your ideas and your way of thinking about television, Andy. But let's start at the beginning, well, at least the beginning of your journey in television. I think you started in Granada, in Manchester.
I did. In fact, rather oddly, it was exactly 50 years ago. As a young 21-year-old, I got a job at Granada as a promotion scriptwriter, which is basically defined as the person who writes the trailers that used to go out between shows in old broadcast days. So, coming up later tonight, you can enjoy it, blah, blah, blah. All that is actually written, and our job was to make the trailers and write it. So it was a fantastic introduction to television, and I was incredibly lucky to get a job at Granada. I had been a journalist. I'd started on a newspaper at 17, so I'd done a year in a paper, then gone to university at Hull, studied politics, went back to the paper in holidays just to try and keep my hand in and frankly to get a bit of money. But I was lucky really because I was given a bit of a steer quite early after university, where it was my last year. I was applying for jobs, and I went to an interview in Newcastle for what was it called? The Echo. I think it was called the Newcastle Echo, the paper. It was a Thompson paper, actually. It was part of the Thompson graduate scheme. And this guy, very wise editor, was interviewing graduates, essentially. He was taking on one or two. They took one or two on in each of the places, regional papers. And when he tapped me more about what excited me, which was, traveling overseas and, just the kind of world events, he said, you're doing the wrong thing. It's the wrong job. You don't want to be a journalist in newspapers. You want to be in TV. TV's if you want to travel, television's the place to be. And he was right.
Well, you've done quite a lot of traveling.
I have done a lot of traveling. I have done a lot of traveling and a lot of exploring, and I met a lot of people because for a good chunk of my career, I was essentially involved in documentaries and news. And that took me, all over Africa, all over South America, and I'd extraordinary range of experiences, as any documentary maker tends to have.
So this was primarily with independent television.
It was later. I stayed at Granada for 5 years, from 21 through to 26. when, James, this is I hope this is encouraging to people. People always think you had a great old life, Andy. It's just gone up and up and up.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't the case, actually. When I was 26 years old, I applied for my third producer's board, because in those days it was quite formally structured. It was a very unionised industry in those days. This was pre-Thatcher. Yes. I applied for my third producer's board, and I was told in no emphatic terms that I was not producer material, and that I was never going to be made a producer by Granada. And the guy rather helpfully said at the end, he thought I should do another trade altogether.
Right.
So that was that. But you
So
know,
how wrong was he?
Well, yes,
as
but
it turns out, sitting here now.
he was wrong. And I was.
So, but did him
really-
telling you that make you more determined to show him he was wrong?
I couldn't wait to get on the train.
Was that a help or a
Yes,
hindrance?
it was
that
a
comment?
fantastic spur. It was.
Spur,
It literally.
that's how
I
you
literally
used
left
it.
the room thinking, well.
I'm going to show you, mate.
Exactly.
Probably worse.
Well, I'm not going to swear on this very, very nice
say what you
podcast,
like,
but absolutely. No, and it literally, it was like jet engine fuel inside me to think, all right, I'm show you. And I was incredibly lucky, because this was the early mid-80s, and just at that time, Channel 4 was being set up. So there was a flood of new production companies that were being set up to make shows for Channel 4. And my services were, actually in
So your
demand.
timing was. So did your paths ever cross again with the man who gave you that feedback?
No, it didn't.
No.
He passed, actually. But I was sad to see that, because I didn't hold him. And I mean, look, I think that.
So he wasn't able to see your.
No, he wasn't.
success.
But I think Granada at that time, I think the middle management in Granada had become a bit dull, a bit boring. It was a very entrepreneurial and interesting company to be a youngster in. It had a great ethos. It was very pro-North. It was sort of very anti-establishment. It was certainly broadly left, not right. I mean, just adding,
This is a commercial TV station.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
that's interesting.
The roots of Granada, when they were set up by the Bernstein family, it was set up in such an extraordinary way, a very entrepreneurial way. They chose that when the ITV was, they sold off basically the regions of ITV to commercial companies in the 50s, and the Bernstein family decided to go for a franchise, and the reason they went for what became Granada, which was the northwest of England, was because it had the highest rainfall in the UK. And they argued or felt that the area with the highest rainfall would be where they watched television most, and therefore,
that's inspired. It's always
inspired.
raining in Manchester, isn't it?
So on top of that, the inspiration of the Bernstein family went further. They then. They constructed a very, it's still there today. It's now a Soho house, of course, but this extraordinary sort of late 50s building. And on the top of the building, they put a tower as if it's beaming out television. It's entirely made of wood. It had no function whatsoever, but it looked like it was beaming this sort of television out to the northwest. And then the other thing that
was a set rather than a real
yes,
satellite.
and then downstairs they had studios 2, 6, 8, and 12.
Yeah.
So when you say, you're in Studio 12, you've got 12 studios. No, they had 4 studios. Very clever.
So I can see there's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
There's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
This world of television.
And I think this culture inside Granada produced a sort of, we'll show them up north, And
so there's a sort of northern pride about it.
Huge northern pride, yeah, and it was a northern, and it sort of instilled you. There was a kind of. Whereas the BBC was sort of educate and entertain, I think Granada was more, not cause trouble, but push it, you provoke it more.
For people who can't see you right now, Andy, I should tell them that you're holding your fist up. And really meaning what you're saying. Yeah, that's real vigor, you're saying.
Well, I was kind of quite a rebellious character, which is probably why they actually got rid of me at first time round. But not rebellious so much, but I've always been quite impetuous and quite sort of... I find authority a little testing.
But you haven't been afraid to sort of have conflict at work?
No, I've had conflict. I don't think I would need to go into that too much. I had one or two fights.
Oh, literally fights?
Yeah, literally, yeah. Now, I'm not proud of that, by the way, but I don't do it
it's in your Wikipedia. It's not
yes,
sort of private.
I know. I don't think I have a temper per se, but I have a sort of short fuse when it comes to things when I think I'm right and someone else is wrong. And it has led to me throwing a punch or two.
I'm a safe distance from you.
But as I say, I don't think it's something to be proud of. I don't know why it's in the Wikipedia.
What young men do and maybe regret later.
I should edit the Wikipedia. But anyway, yes, it did. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're obviously passionate about one other way of looking at it is you care about what you do and you're passionate about your work.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm incredibly lucky because television suited my personality perfectly, and that's what I realised when I got there. I mean, I was an okay journalist. I could write decently, but I wasn't a great writer. I have a very short attention span. I'm a bit ADHD, and I'm dyslexic. So all these sort of things combine for perfectly in television, where everything is done on a bit of a rush, and you can do a bit of everything. You can film a bit and produce a bit and edit a bit and direct a bit and all that kind of stuff. And it's particularly if you're doing news or documentaries, that ability to basically be across everything, be able to do everything and anything is really helpful. It was grand.
So then you got involved with Channel 4 commissioning.
No, not commissioning. I was always worked for independent companies.
So they were commissioning you.
Yeah,
at
they
the
were commissioning. Yeah, not me directly.
So who did you work for after Granada? After you left?
So yeah, and I worked. Now I had a whole succession. I was for 10 years after Granada, from being about 27, 28 till about 37, 38. I was a freelance director, and that was pretty rare in those days. It was unusual, and I worked mainly for South Bank Show for Melvin Bragg and for Alan Yentob at Arena, and I did a lot of art shows. I made profiles of people like Malcolm McLaren and the Sex Pistols, Truman Capote, Lenny Henry, Mario Vargas Llosa, the Peruvian novelist. There were just basically subjects or stories or people that I was interested in, and I gathered enough experience to be able to sell shows directly to arts channels, essentially, so straight in. So, they were great adventures. I mean, on the Malcolm McLaren and the Sex Pistols one, I went off to New York for 3 or 4 months and just lived there, had dinner with Andy Warhol, rocked around New York.
So you became friends with these people, basically.
I did.
I can imagine, yeah.
I think when the documentary maker, you have to you just sort of move in beside the person you're making a film about, and it led to extraordinary moments and experiences. I mean, one wishes one had the experience and wisdom later to apply to some of those moments, But I mean, all the films were good and were great fun.
What do you think of when you say that?
I just think sometimes, looking back, I just wish. I wish some of I've long wanted to. Yeah, that's ridiculous, isn't it? But I mean, the Malcolm McLaren and the Sex Pistols. When you look back now, that's 50 odd years since all that. No, it's not 50 years. Yeah, it's nearly 50
almost.
Years. It's almost 50 years. Yeah. And I just wish I'd love to go back. I shot so much stuff, a lot of which was not in the film. Would be great to re-edit, to go back to those rushes and reassemble that film in a different way, because so much of it is fascinating, and a fascinating portrait, not just of a rock band, but obviously of the times. That whole punk thing was so part of the UK in those mid-70s, which was a pretty depressing time.
What if doing good was the smartest business move you'll ever make? I'm James Reed, CEO of Reed. In my new book, Karma Capitalism, I reveal how being a Philco, that's a company where at least 10% of shares are owned by a charitable foundation, has become our business superpower. Companies like Lego, IKEA and Novo Nordisk share the same Philco identity. These businesses last longer, inspire loyalty, and make a bigger impact on society. This book is part manifesto, part practical guide. Karma Capitalism is available now at karmacapitalism.org. Being a good business is good business. Those rushes, I guess, from Malcolm McLaren or the Sex Pistols, they don't exist anymore, I imagine.
Sadly, they don't. I did check, actually, a few years ago, but they've been thrown out. A great deal of television, 60s, 70s, 80s stuff was thrown away. I had an infamous experience as a presenter. A rather unwise producer thought I should be on the telly and present the news, which I did.
Oh, so you were the news presenter?
For 3 months. I was bad to terrible on most days, and
what's this in Granada?
This was in Granada, and finally led to a terribly awful experience in a show where I basically messed up everything. I read the news on rehearsal in 6 minutes, and then finally read it live in 3, and was left looking at the camera, looking gormless, and then messed up an interview with a MP down the line. And I just went from bad to worse. It was horrible. Now the good news is it doesn't exist.
Oh, I see. So we can't find this to clip in.
Thankfully, this is the only time I've ever been grateful that TV libraries
so that was no longer. Do they keep material now?
They do much. Yes, they do. Yes. It's yeah.
So if that had been now, it would be in some archive.
Well, I wouldn't be telling the story
somewhere.
People could watch it.
But so that, I suppose, that was your experience in front of camera. You've been
yes. I wisely decided
since.
this was a step sideways and indeed backwards, one might say.
Right. So what made you make the transition from documentaries to drama to scripted?
That's an interesting question. That's a good question, actually. What really happened was that I was always fundamentally interested in comedy, but I couldn't get into comedy per se. Granada didn't really do any comedy, so when I was a kid and was doing the news shows and the news stuff, there wasn't really any. There was some comedy, but it wasn't something. I don't know why, but it just felt like a bit of not so much a closed world, but something I couldn't get into. And the way into it for me was making essentially a documentary about Lenny Henry, actually. And Lenny lived near me in Hammersmith. I'd just moved down from Manchester to London. I'd started working at the South Bank show on a freelance basis. Basically I had to, every idea, I had to sell it to Melvin or Alan Yentob, but Melvin was my preferred choice at the time. And I went to the corner shop and there was Lenny Henry buying some milk. So I thought, he would be interesting because, he was a young black comedian. He just married into new comedy by marrying Dawn French, and he obviously lived locally. So I followed him discreetly back to see where he lived. I didn't know him at all. Right. So I clocked where he lived, and I then went back to the house, and I thought, South Bank show never does anything about comedy, and they've certainly never done anything about a black comedian. And in fact, Lenny is sort of probably the first black comedian anyway, pretty much. And so I probably wrote to Melvin. I can't remember if I wrote him or rang him. Anyway, he was very excited. So then I dropped a note back round to Lenny saying, you don't know me, but I live around the corner and it would be great to make a film about you. And he agreed. And we became very close friends. And we went to New York together, and I followed him up and down the road on tour and made this documentary. And then I made a sort of feature show where he of his tour, which was released in the late 80s. What I loved about working with Lenny was how dangerous comedy felt, because when we took him to New York at the time, he's tall, big, Lenny. And he's got this fantastic English accent. And I know it's strange to remember, but if you went to New York in the mid-'80s and you were a British black guy and you opened your mouth, people nearly fell over. I mean, they literally couldn't believe Lenny spoke with such a refined...
They thought it was funny.
They thought it was really strange because they weren't used to British black guys, in a sense.
Right.
And we had the most experience...
So he got a lot of attention.
Yeah, but the point about going to New York was I was going to put him on in a club called Catch a Rising Star and film the final concert, final time. This was the climax of the film, just about 5 or 10 minutes of stand-up in New York, i.e. Lenny conquers New York. So we put him on the Monday, Tuesday night, and he died a total death. I mean, it was excruciating to watch it.
Why?
Well, because the material just didn't work.
Didn't fly in New York.
They didn't understand what he was talking about. They didn't understand him, and they didn't understand what he was talking about.
Oh, no.
Because comedy is always inherently, about experience. It's something, it relates to an experience. Shared experiences. Oh. So the most extraordinary thing happened, or I witnessed it anyway, with Lenny, and we had Kim Fuller, who was a writer who worked with Lenny. And for the next few days, we just tootled around New York, and we went to nightclubs, and we did this, that, and the other. We met Prince in a nightclub one night, amazingly, because Prince had seen Lenny's impression of him, came up to him and looked at him up. And Prince was pretty small guy. Looked up at Lenny and said, "I know who you are, and I know what you've done on that television show in England." But Lenny loved Prince, so he was like all over and so excited. But the point about this story was that Lenny then started to write all this into a whole new 10-minute stand-up. So by the time he got up on the Friday night to record his new stand-up, it was all about being a black British guy in New York in 1987 or whatever it was at the time, 6 or 7, I can't remember. It went down a storm. I mean, absolute storm, which was fantastic. But the point about the story for me was that I realised how vital comedy was. How much you could do, how quickly you could change people. How brilliant it was when you made people laugh, and what it took to make people laugh, and how brave you've got to be in a sense to stand in front of an audience and start telling jokes and be that person. So I just suddenly thought this was fascinating, and this really opened. I sort of found, I think, sort of roughly what I wanted to do. I then worked with Jonathan Ross quite a bit, and I met Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer. And
So you started doing scripted comedy.
yeah, so I was starting to move it. Well, not entirely scripted initially, but it became scripted comedy.
Improvisers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it was more. Yes, exactly. It was the start of a journey that led me eventually to being asked to be the head of comedy at Granada, to go back to Granada 10 years after I left in the early 90s. And
that's a good joke, isn't
yes.
it? You went back. After that send-off they gave you.
Yeah. Well,
so you came back as the head of comedy.
Indeed,
good for
I
you.
did. Yes.
So how long were you there doing that then?
I did that.
Your second innings.
Yeah, my second innings was quite long. So I did The Royal Family and everything with Caroline Aherne and a show called Cold Feet, and they were very, very successful. Quite a lot of other stuff. And around the same time, I started working with Peter Morgan, who's the writer best known for the Crown, but he's obviously done lots and lots of stuff, and lots of stuff with me. And I'd met him in the late 80s, and then we were great friends. And then he started writing stuff for me. He was a sort of, I don't know, he entirely described himself as a comedy writer, but he was writing comedy dramas in the 90s. I think he saw himself at that time as a writer, who could pretty much turn his hand to anything. But in time,
So this was the beginning of an important partnership.
Yes, very important partnership. Yeah, and I've worked with Peter off and on pretty much my whole career, and there's no question that we've done. We've been very good for each other. We've done fantastic stuff together. And The Crown is we did the movie The Queen. And then a play called The Audience, which was essentially about the royal family again, and then.
So the royal family's been a big thing.
The royal family has been a big thing. So the royal family, the initial royal family show I did, obviously was a sitcom about a family in Manchester just called The Royals.
I know. Yeah, that's a good one.
That's good.
So that took you on a journey.
And then the real royal family became, Well, yes.
So tell me about the Queen. That was a famous film. Huh?
The Queen came about. I think I would suggest that the Queen really came about. Its roots lay in the week that Diana died in 1997, because it was such a strange week to be in London, and both Peter and I were. Those who were in London at that time will remember. I mean, it was not, of course, it was across the whole country, the shock.
But I remember it.
Yeah, but in London, there was a kind of weird stillness to the atmosphere. Everyone was sort of paralysed. And these flowers were piling up outside Kensington House and all that kind of stuff. And I think Peter and I were just, we were talking about it every day. What was going on? What was it about Diana that people became so obsessed about? So why were they projecting so much onto her and taking so much away from her? It was really difficult to analyse. And I don't think we thought at the time we'll come back to it, but it just never went away, that sense. And when, a little later on, Peter found this incredible voice of being able to write contemporary history. And the first film that demonstrates this was a film called The Deal, which I produced with him for Channel 4. And it was a film about how Tony Blair and Gordon Brown fought it out to become the leader of the Labour Party.
And that restaurant.
Yes, exactly. The Granada Deal. Exactly.
Yeah,
well done, James. That's it.
No,
There was a restaurant in Islington where we actually did film the scene in the actual restaurant for Panda. And Peter had become very interested in this story, and it was a bit of a departure for him in terms of his writing, but it was something he wrote incredibly well and incredibly quickly. He suddenly found, in my view, his voice.
When you say his voice, how do you describe that genre?
Peter has a view of not writing anything which is less than 10 years old, i.e. he will not do anything. He really wants to do modern history, but modern British history primarily. But it has to have at least 10 or 15 years distance.
Okay.
So that he can, because that's...
So he can interpret it. And
yes. You get a much greater sense of really what happened if you're
with a bit of perspective.
Away. Yeah, I mean, if you try and write something, I guess, you couldn't really write something now about...
well, that Granada Deal would have looked very different 2 years after than it would 15 years
exactly.
after.
People write books, people talk about it, and you get it. Also, you can see the sense it's set in the history, isn't it? I see how important that was. It's very difficult to judge, I think, when things are happening, how important they're going to be and how important they're not going to be. one, if you're looking at the history of the BBC, you might look at the events of this week where the Director General and the Head of News both departed. That could be a real turning point of the BBC if you're looking back in 5 or 10 years. And it may be a good thing or a bad thing, but you won't know for many years.
It might be irrelevant.
It might be irrelevant, exactly. So anyway, the deal was a film we made for Channel 4, and it was critically a big hit. It also was on HBO as well, so it did really well for us, and it launched Peter as a proper serious writer, and it obviously didn't do me any harm either. And I think we were looking for a follow up for it. What
So at this point, you've got your own business.
No, I'm running. I'm at ITV.
I'm still at ITV.
Yeah, no. By this point, I've taken over the drama though.
Right.
I absorbed the drama department sort of slightly because the people who were running it. I was running the comedy department, and there was a drama department alongside. I didn't have anything to do with the drama department. It was nothing to do with me, and I didn't have any designs on it, in all honesty. But at the time, when they suddenly left, I thought, oh, that might be quite interesting. But I wasn't. Anyway, I got it, and.
So that was an important moment in your journey.
It was an important moment, and there was a bit of a division at ITV about whether to give it me or not. I mean, again, I think I've always divided people. Some,
right.
You're
a Marmite
actually, I don't like to be divided. I think there's always been one or two people who are. I think it's one or two, not really a big division.
Yeah.
I've always had as many enthusiastic supporters as those who.
Right. So not everyone wanted this to happen, but it did happen.
It did happen,
and your trajectory.
Well,
then
and I set myself
set in a way.
Yeah, and I kind of, I set myself up slightly because I at the interview I was interviewed for the job, and they said, well, what would you do with Granada Drama? Now, Granada Drama had many glories in the past. It was still very decent, but the big glories of the past were Cracker and Prime Suspect. And so I said in the interview rather boldly, I would definitely bring back Prime Suspect with Helen Mirren. And they all sort of leaned forward and went, oh, that's great. Would you? Yeah, I said, it's a tremendous brand, and, it's 7 or 8 years since it's been on, and I don't know why you don't continue it, and I'd like to bring it back. And, and the thing about Prime Suspect, it sold incredibly well around the world. So this was kind of music to the ears. Here was a guy who was planning to not only run the drama thing, but also bring back one of the most successful shows. But I had no evidence whatsoever to back this suggestion up. Yeah. And I got the job, and of course, they almost immediately said, so great, so when is Prime Suspect coming back? And I went, yeah, right, okay. And, I rang up Helen Mirren's agent, who just laughed. Helen's got no interest in doing Prime Suspect. She's in Los Angeles. Right. I said, I know, but I mean, couldn't she just fit it in? I mean, couldn't we... she said, absolutely not. I'm sorry. Ridiculous idea. Yeah. Anyway, I persevered, as one has to do. And I took a different tack, and I said, look, eventually I said, look, would you just ask if Helen would at least meet me for a cup of tea in a nice place? Very, very fond of Claridge's. It's good. People love Claridge's.
People do tea in Claridge's.
Yeah, they do tea in Claridge's. Yeah. No one turns down tea in Claridge's.
Right. That's a useful tip.
Well, we did a lot of our research for a lot of these films. When you're trying to wine and dine somebody, a politician or somebody interesting, it's a tea in Claridge's is always a good one. It also suggests it's not too long. That's
the thing. It's not as long as lunch.
Yeah, if you say lunch, they go,
but it's late in the day as well.
Exactly, a cup of tea. It's just a cup of tea. Yeah. It's an expensive cup of tea. But
who's paying? Yeah,
anyway, so my tack was when she was next in London, because she was often flew in and flew out. Would she at least meet me for a cup of tea, and I could put to her what I was trying to suggest? And eventually the agent very decently said yes, and I met Helen, and I got on with her very well. She was naturally quite cautious, but I basically put to her the advantage of Prime Suspect, which was because you had a brand, because she's playing a detective, it's a detective show, so therefore it's hugely popular, but you could do subjects that were much more... not just interesting, but not so much even controversial, but just a bit edgier, a much more interesting and contemporary political story. That's basically what I put to her. And so I did what became Prime Suspect 6 and Prime Suspect 7. And 7 was the one that won huge amount. Well, both won lots of awards, but Prime Suspect 7 was particularly interesting because when Prime Suspect was launched in the early 90s, it essentially was its shtick was it's a woman in a man's world. And I know that seems extraordinary now in 2025 to be discussing that, but in the early 90s, it really was still unusual. And it was a very male world, isn't it, the police? So that's why Prime Suspect had such impact, and Helen was completely brilliant in it. So the final Prime Suspect I wanted to do was an older woman in a man's world. Because that's another whole different thing. A woman in her 50s and 60s who's facing retirement but not quite out the door. And that male resentment I think, was very real. And also we made the character an alcoholic as well. And anyway, Helen was very brave in agreeing to go along with this, and it was there were tremendous hits, and they were huge in America, and it really opened up my whole ambition. I think I sort of realised, because this is a long time before streaming, and it was still television in the UK. In the early 2000s, the noughties, I think it's called, isn't it? But, it was still pretty provincial, really. So to get a show that was being broadcast on HBO and going to awards in America was something special. And HBO had a special fascination for me and for many of people like me, because HBO had been producing this extraordinarily good, high-end quality work. And I think we all admired it. That's what we wanted to do. And so to get shows on HBO, actually, Prime Centre wasn't on HBO, but we were getting shows on HBO. It was an ambition, and that's really what opened me up to the possibility, along with the success of The Queen, the movie, to doing it. And the link between all of this was Helen, because I had a read through for one of the Prime Suspects when she came in. People were so pleased to see her, and there was such reverence for her. I just noticed that everybody kind of nodded as if they were in the presence of the Queen,
right?
And it was like a light that just went on my head. I thought, my God, of course she could play the Queen, couldn't she? And I sat through this whole read through just thinking about this, and I suddenly thought, oh my God, she's the perfect age the Queen was in the week that Diana died. So you said it all sort of started to come together right in the middle. It was just a bit of a flashbulb moment, to be truthful. And the story wasn't as simple to find, and Peter did a brilliant job in finding it. But eventually it all came together brilliantly. We got Stephen Frears to direct it, and it all started to roll.
It was shortlisted for an Academy Award, wasn't it?
It was. We went to the awards. I sat very near Martin Scorsese, and he turned to me and he said, "You did great getting here." And I thought at the time it was a little bit patronising, but actually on reflection, I don't think it was patronising. I think we were very privileged to be there, and I was privileged to be talking.
No, I think you did great getting there. It's a brilliant success.
Yeah,
and a great film.
Yeah. The Queen was a bit of a watershed for many reasons. Firstly, its success was obviously pretty spectacular. I mean, it made a hell of a lot of money for ITV. And for me, it brought me into sort of a whole different level of recognition, I suppose, in a certain way, and for Peter and everybody involved. But it was also, it felt like the end of my ITV career, to be truthful. I had been a bit restless at ITV, and I felt there was I knew that quite a few of my pals were running their own companies, and they were doing pretty well, and the government legislation had allowed production companies to own their own rights, so if you had made successful shows, you could make money. But it wasn't the money particularly that I was interested in. It was really the freedom to do the sort of shows I wanted to do without being restrained. I mean, there was a moment on The Queen when it nearly didn't happen because there was opposition from the senior management, and one senior manager who didn't want to see it happen, just didn't really understand what we were doing and didn't think we should be wasting our time. We had to wait till he went on holiday before we could get it through the...
Okay, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, well, that's fine, but not fine, and we got it through, so it was okay. But I just thought, I think there's a different way of doing these shows, and if we're now in a different game, if we're able to make movies that make money and what have you, then maybe I should take the plunge and start up a company. And that was pretty daunting, if I was honest with you. I mean, it took a long time, as my wife remembers, to hum and ha, should I, shouldn't I? I was on a big salary, got 3 kids.
That's hard to do later in a career, isn't it?
I was
a successful career.
I was approaching
somewhere.
50.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought, oof, geez, and my wife wanted to just look after her. We were blessed with a daughter, and she wanted to stop work and just write books and look after the daughter. So that was no income coming in there. And I said, okay.
Right.
And it was hairy, and but I thought, well, why not?
But looking back, you're glad you did this, clearly.
It was one of the best things I ever did, of course. I'd looked at other things. I'd talked to other people.
Well, it's important for people listening, I think, to hear that.
Yeah,
because lots of people wonder, should I make that
Well,
move?
and
for you, it works.
Yeah, I mean, I
but
had
it was
conversations
scary.
with quite a few other companies about joining them as partners and this and that, but none of them really seemed to give me the potential excitement of doing it on my own,
So you really wanted just to do your own thing. I mean, just to have the freedom and
I think I just wanted to be unleashed. I think there was the entrepreneurial spirit of me, sense of me, wanted to, God damn it, why don't I just do it? And people would say, God, Andy, go do it, And so we did.
So this was 18 years ago.
This was 18 years ago, exactly. So we set it up, Left Bank Pictures.
Why'd you call it that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I couldn't decide for many months about what to call it. And it was it was a shower moment. It was a bit of another light bulb moment. I am prone to these. I mean, you'll laugh. It's left because I politically lean left rather than right.
Right.
If you go to Hull University,
I shouldn't say right. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Left it is. Yeah, go on.
That was one thing. The second thing was bank suggests security, reliability, safety, and that's very important. So I was really thinking about the image of the company. What was the name and what you can project was really important. So I gave a lot of thought to that because I knew you're setting up a company and people, what's the name? What are they?
So you've got head and heart in there. You've got head and heart with Left Bank.
Exactly. So that was basically it. So it's the kind of Left Bank, and of course the Left Bank is the arty part of Paris, which we all like to swing down galleries and stuff like that. So it felt it had a resonance of familiarity. And I was very struck by a friend of mine who had left Hull University around the same time as me, and he had set up what he did, he had I don't know why, but he had a white van. And so he used to move a few of us when we left university, he'd do the removals. I'll load up my van. Anyway, this led to setting up a removals business in London.
Yeah.
And he decided to put two things together, Cadogan Square and the Tate Gallery. And he called it Cadogan Tate.
Oh, that's quite a famous removal company.
Exactly. But you see, I'll phone them. They've been around for years. It must be. They're called Cadogan. Do you know what I mean?
It was just a guy from Hull University.
It was just
it's a bit like the Bernsteins or whatever.
It's just another chancellor from Hull.
Yeah. Oh, well, good for him.
So I think Left Bank was that. That's what I had always remembered that story. And I thought, that's what I need, that sort of familiarity, so people feel it's a company that absolutely. Because the thing about, if people are going to, broadcasters are going to give you some serious money, they need to be reassured that you are.
And you thought the word bank would help with that.
Yes,
that's interesting. And it did.
It did. I think it did. I mean, you can never tell. But I mean, so the idea of the company was Left Bank Limited and Left Bank Pictures Limited, and it would. And we were set out to make ambitious global drama for an international marketplace, because that's where I thought it was going. Because I couldn't see the streamers. I mean, I'm not that far-sighted, but I definitely could see the need to grow drama in a bigger way that would work in different countries around the world. That's what I got a taste for.
Right.
We're doing The Prime Suspects and Granada, and then
So what did you start off with Left Bank?
Well, one of the very early shows was Ken Braner in Wallander. Yes. Which was a bunch of books that had not been made. There were a bunch of detective books in Sweden. They were very good books, actually. And someone called me up and said, would I be interested? And my father-in-law is Michael Frayn, and he was a big fan of the writer. And it wasn't really Michael's thing, but I had remembered, and this is where you take sort of, what is it? It's a network of different influences and moments. So around this time, Michael was writing a play called Copenhagen, which is one of his best plays. And so he was spending a lot of time in Denmark. And he called in on the way back from the airport to our house and dropped one of Henning Menkel's, he's the novelist, books off and said, I don't really read crime novels normally, but this writer is really extraordinary. You should have a look. And at the same time, this producer called me from Denmark to say he'd got the rights. Would I be interested? And I just thought, there's a confluence here, and confluence is really interesting, I think. And it's confluence and instinct combines. I think bang. I don't know why. Got to get in there, bang.
Yeah.
And so that was. So they had the raw material. I don't know quite what it was that made me reach for Ken Braner. I knew Ken's assistant quite well. I just suddenly thought, I was just trying to think about who would do it, who would make a difference. And Ken was having one of those periods where he'd slipped away a little bit from visibility. I don't mean that he was in the doldrums. I don't think he was at all. But he hadn't done anything desperately high profile for a while. And I called up the assistant and I said, "Is there about any chance? Do you think Ken would in any way be interested in doing this?" And she said, "Well, funny enough, he does like these novels." And I said, "Do you think he'd meet me for a drink?" I promise you, we met in the pub for 20 minutes. We shook hands, and that was it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I said, "Look, just be our partner. We'll just shake hands. There's no need for. I mean, obviously we paid him well, and all that, but it wasn't about trying to. I think when you have a chance to work with key or great talent, you've just got to put yourself on the line and say, right, let's do this as partners. We'll work together. It's your show as much as mine. We're going to make it with you and for you and all that kind of stuff. We'll give you full support and bang. But I'm really interested in listening to your view on it and how the characters should be. I mean, you're dealing with someone like Ken. He's proper. He's really proper. Incredibly impressive experience to work with him. And we did 4 series of it. It was fantastic.
Yeah. So that really got your business.
Really got business, yeah. And then I did another show, which really... The funny thing is that Wallander was good. It was for the BBC, and it sold well around the world. So it was everything I wanted to make. Cinematic television. That was the key phrase that I would drop everywhere. Cinematic television, which is really just about having ambition, to be honest with you. It's just shooting it well, using the best technicians you can and the best directors you can find, and having ambition. Don't start here when you can start here. Start here. Let's start higher. Let's just go even higher. Let's blue screen. What do you think we could, if all the stars aligned, could we achieve? Well, that's when we're going to start. And then maybe finish even higher. Who knows?
Aim high.
Absolutely,
that's your
James.
motto.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing it.
Yeah,
It makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a bit obsessive, but I mean, why not? What's
cinematic television.
Cinematic television. But so the other rather bizarre, and I've told this story a few times, but it was involved a book that I picked up in an airport on the way to see Peter Morgan for some project or other. When a plane is delayed or what have you, I usually just go and stand in a bookshop and just look and just let whatever is in front of me circle in front of my eyes. Just see if something falls out, something catches.
But you're kind of doing this because you're looking for an idea.
Yeah, just looking for anything.
Is there a story here that might make cinematic television?
Absolutely. And there is. But
there will be some way. Just having a look.
Well, right in front of my eyes on this very particular occasion was this book all piled up, which was an action thriller, and it was called Strike Back. And I think the tagline was, a Sky TV reporter is kidnapped by the Mujahideen, something like that. Picked it up, bought it, bunged it in my rucksack, and went off. Never read it. So 3 or 4 weeks after the trip to Austria, I suddenly realised I had this meeting at Sky Television. And the head of drama, I really liked her. She was smashing. She was sort of a pal, but she'd never commissioned anything because I didn't have much money at that time. So I didn't really expect to be selling anything. I just thought I'd go in, have a natter, have a bit of a gossip, have a coffee with her and come home. But I did remember I had the Sky book, so I just threw it into the briefcase and went to meet her. Anyway, we chit-chatted away for about 10 or 15 minutes, and she suddenly leaned forward and said, listen, great news. I've got money. It's got to be a book and something entertaining and or maybe even action. I said, stop there. Pulled the book out. This is it. This is your new series. She said, that's great. What is it? I said, what's the story? I said, it's just, don't worry about the story, but bang. And she went next door and came back with an order of 10 shows.
Really?
Yeah.
And then you had to read the book.
No, I never read the book. It's not my job to read the book. It doesn't matter.
What happened next then? How did you make the show?
No, but you know what? Of course, I rushed out the meeting. First call was to my lawyer.
Right.
I said, Charlie's called Charlie. This is lovely Charlie. He's been working for a long time. I said, Charlie, I don't care what you're doing. Drop everything. Ring this guy, writer's agent, immediately and buy the rights. Don't take no for an answer. And close today, please. Anyway, we got it. So it was a bit hairy. So I was selling a book I didn't even have. Never mind, I haven't read.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So
I've told that story a few times.
You have to take a leap here.
You have to take a leap. But that series went on to 8 series, and we did it with HBO. Not the first series, but HBO came in on the second, and then it ran for 8 series. And that's what made Left Bank all the money. And when we sold initially to Sony after 4 years, it was Strike Back that had driven the old bottom line up to make us very viable.
So this was so from 2007 to 11 you were making Strike Back.
Yeah, well, I was making loads of shows, but the Strike Back was the one that made the money.
And then in 2011 Sony came in and bought a stake in your business.
Well, a sort of rather odd thing happened actually, because I mean, I'm going to be honest, we started Left Bank with 3 or 4 people. I mean, that was it. And, we had an absolutely hardline rule. No lunches, no taxes, no expenses, and we all paid ourselves, I don't know, 100,000 or 125,000, or whatever it was. Anyway, that's what I was paid. We had just no real development money, or if we were going to spend anything, it was almost spending our own money. Well, it was our own money, but I sold 25% of the company to kick it off to the BBC for £1 million. So we were sort of worth £4 million from kick-off point.
And so that was the money you had to finance what you were doing.
So we had £1 million to keep us going for as long as we could. Yeah. And £1 million doesn't really go very, very far, even in
not if you're paying people.
No, no, and your offices and everything. So it took us about 6-8 months, I think, before we got a commission. We got one at ITV, and we got Wallander, we got a couple of other things, and then we got Strike Back, I think, year 2 or 3, I forget now. So the first couple of years were very testing, and but then it started to accelerate very quickly, and then I suddenly got a call after 4 years. I had not really thought about this at all, actually. Maybe it was Canal Plus. It doesn't matter anyway. So anyway, these French guys rang up. Could they come and have a meet? They were interested in our company. I said, yeah, sure. Pop in. They popped in and said, look, we're interested in buying you. And I nearly fell off the chair. I said, well, why do you want to do that? He said, well, you're obviously making a lot of shows. You must be making a lot of money. We haven't seen your books, but we assume you are. I said, I don't know, I guess. Anyway, this puzzled me a little bit, and I went, and then another couple of people rang me up, and I was so sort of consumed with the shows. It wasn't that I didn't know what was going on. I did know what was going on, but I hadn't really ever thought about selling the company, to be truthful. I just wanted a company that I could make the shows not without interference either. I just wanted to make the shows in an environment that would be creative and would be supportive, as opposed to challenging. So I went along to see a very wonderful lawyer, Mark, and I said, I'm a bit puzzled. All these people keep ringing me up. He said, oh, well, have a look at your figures. Got the figures up. He said, well, your EBIT's going to be 4 million this year. I said, yeah, well, it's quite good, isn't it? He said, well, it means you're worth 40 million. I said, what? Well, you said it's about 10, maybe 8 to 10, but let's assume 10. Yeah, it's worth about 40 million. I just Jesus. He said,
so you were surprised at this?
I just hadn't even thought about it.
Yeah.
And then, so we went into this. So I thought, when I went back and obviously talked to the troops, I said, "What do you think?" I mean, they all had it. I mean, I wasn't the sole. Obviously the BBC had 25%, and of the other 75%, pretty well everyone who had started with me had a decent a chunk anyway. I said, "What do you think? Should we? What's the advantage and what's the disadvantage?" Well, the advantage was twofold. One, obviously, it was you would get a certain amount of money, which was obviously good. And it had been quite hard times. The other one, really, to be honest with you, was that the business was developing internationally quite fast, and an American partner was something that seemed to make a lot of sense. You can't work in America without partnering in America. They are not interested. I mean, the Americans are very... I'd learned that long ago when going to America. You've got to partner up with Americans. They're not going to let you come in and take money out of their patch unless they're going to get a hefty chunk. Fair dues, And so it did seem to me not a bad idea that we should perhaps entertain this. And then one thing led to another, and obviously we appointed somebody to help to sell the company. And this was a fairly familiar route for production companies. We weren't the first to sell. And eventually, after there was a lot of interest, and it was quite a process, but an interesting process. And then eventually, Sony bought the company, and that was good in every respect. Really,
Did they buy out the BBC as well?
they bought the BBC out. I gave the BBC back
So they got a good return on their
10
investment.
million in 4 years. I thought it was damn decent of them.
Yeah.
Damn decent.
They must love you.
But the point was, Sony were buying it over 5 years, so there wasn't any real immediate change. But
Sony, I mean, I think of Sony as a Japanese firm, but Sony have a huge, obviously,
yeah,
studios in America.
Yeah.
Columbia Pictures.
Yeah,
and
no,
everything.
it's the
So you think of it as the American part of Sony that bought you
it was
out.
yes, exactly. The big studios in the US. I mean, it's a big company. I mean, it's not one of the biggest studios. Well, it's one of the smaller studios, but it's still a pretty big company.
Sure.
And of course, all the electronics and all that kind of stuff. So we're good. And actually, I think there's no question that Sony our partnership with Sony, which it was a partnership at that time, essentially, was vital in underwriting the Crown deal with Netflix.
So tell me about that, because Netflix was sort of just emerged. I mean, from my perspective, your show, The Crown, was the first thing I watched on Netflix. I remember. So this sort of came in the UK at least. They used The Crown as a hook, didn't they? To get us sign up to Netflix.
That's exactly why we got such a hefty.
So how did that all come about? What happened? Yeah,
basically what happened. This was really so. In terms of the show, it was an extension of my relationship with Peter Morgan. So we had done The Queen, which was at Granada. That was the last thing I'd done at Granada. ITV. Then Peter did a few other things, we did some stuff together, but not very much, until after I had sold the company. Peter had some reservations about working for me. I never really quite understood that, but anyway, he felt he was uneasy about working for Left Bank for some reason or other. But when I sold the company to Sony, he completely relaxed and said, "Oh, that's okay. I'll work with you now." I said, "Fine." So one thing led to another. First, he wanted to do a play called The Audience, which was a sort of spin-off, essentially, of The Crown.
I saw it.
Yeah. Good.
Explain what it was.
Well, it was essentially, Peter had become obsessed with the private sessions between the Prime Minister and the Queen, because there's no recorded material. The Prime Ministers have always sort of agreed never to write about what they discussed with the Queen, and the Queen obviously has never published anything either. So essentially, those meetings are entirely unknown, whatever transpired. So that's sort of perfect for a writer. He can make the whole thing up. And Peter likes to do that. But he has an unerring instinct about what was probably said or what might have been said.
I remember the Queen like Harold Wilson in the play.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, it is true. I mean, so what Peter does is draw heavily on research. And he obviously got a very wide network of people who talk to him about life in the court and the politicians, and as we all do, but Peter in particular. And he just thought it was a great idea, and could we get Helen back to do it? And I got involved in the play, and we got Helen back, and etc. So the Audience was successful. It was on the stage in London, and it went to New York, which is it was a great experience. I was involved as a producer, but it ran for a few months very successfully. And then there was a little short passage of time, and then Peter was noodling. He was working on film scripts, and I kept saying to him, Peter, you should do your big series. You are like, there's a great American writer called Aaron Sorkin who's done some brilliant stuff, and it's very like Peter, writes contemporary political, historical pieces, like West Wing, stuff like that. It's very Peter. And I met Sorkin. It was so like meeting Peter Morgan, I couldn't believe it. But anyway, I kept saying, come and be the Aaron Sorkin of the UK. But he was in New York at the time as well. So eventually he came back, and then he sent me an idea initially of the young Elizabeth and the old Churchill. And he said, did I think it was make a movie? He'd written a couple of pages. And I read it, I thought, this is interesting. It's just something in this. I don't think it's a movie, though. I don't think it's quite big enough to be a movie somehow. It wasn't quite the Queen. It wasn't, So I had a long chat to him on the phone, and he said, well, there's a lot of material around this. Maybe it's a miniseries, or maybe it's a lot longer. I don't know. And then within like a week, he sort of phoned me back and said, I think it's 3 series. I said, yeah, it's just the Queen. So about the Queen. The Queen's at the centre of it. And then about 2 days later, no, it's not 3, it's 6. It's 6 series. We change the cast every 2 years. The Queen's at the heart of the whole thing. And it's going to cost a fortune. And it's only worth doing if we get the money. But it could be brilliant. I said, well, that sounds great. But I was...
Well, that's a good summary of what it turned into.
Well, to be honest with you, absolutely what Peter wanted, he wrote and we delivered. It never changed. It never changed. But the challenge of the Crown, just to try and bet down, was Peter. I mean, so did I. I wanted to do it really well. That meant a big budget. We knew that ITV couldn't afford it. We knew that the BBC couldn't afford it, and we knew that the BBC probably couldn't do it. They probably could have done the early years okay, but they're going to get into a lot of old hot water.
Because of the politics of it.
Yeah, once you get into Diana and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Once you get nearer to the present times, as we did, we knew the BBC would become would be very challenging for them because of their inevitably close links with the palace. So we didn't quite know how we were going to make that work, so it was not good, and so we thought, well, we knew somehow we had to find an American partner. We thought HBO would probably maybe do it with one ITV or Channel 4.
What sort of budget were you thinking for this first season?
It became $5 million an episode.
$5 million, and how many episodes in a season?
10.
So but 50 million starting price. Yeah.
Yes, but it's more than it was a bigger ask than that because we were asking for 2 series at a go. So we were asking for 20 hours.
So you're looking for $100 million.
We were looking for $100 million commitment. It was
right. So there aren't many people who can write that sort of check. Breathtakingly bonkers. Yeah. Okay. So how did you pull this off, Andy?
Well,
it's pretty amazing. And a lot of people enjoyed The Crown. So what did you do? I want to hear this story.
Well, we set up a week in the first week in January, whatever it was, 2013 or 14, 2012 or 13. So we'd had the BBC and ITV interest pre-Christmas, and then we went. There's myself and Peter Morgan and Stephen Daldry, the director, and we went and did a meeting every day for 1 week in LA, and that was HBO and Fox and Showtime and whoever else it was, and then Netflix was on the last day. And each of the 4 US big broadcasters, all the bosses were there for us, which is impressive. But also, I mean, Stephen Daldry and Peter, I mean, if not me, I mean, they are big names, Oscar nominated and all that kind of stuff. So you'd expect that. They all liked the idea. Peter had written the first script. They all loved the script. But, I mean, they would lean forward saying, seriously, $100 million for a pile of British history? I mean, really? Can't you do a mini-series about Diana, like just 4 hours? That's what they wanted.
That's what they wanted.
So there were the conversations were intelligent and smart and thoughtful, but they were a pass. And so we ticked, towards that final meeting with this. So
you must have got the message back at this point from the others, had you? Or were you feeling a bit disconsolate at this point?
It's all passing. They were all passing.
So you knew this was your last shot.
So by the Thursday night, we basically thought we're going to be going home Saturday. Or Friday night, actually. I think we were going up on Friday night, empty-handed. Good try, nice idea, ambitious project, just
one for the draw.
Yeah, but Netflix were interesting. Obviously they'd been around for a little while, but they had only just started producing original programs.
Talk me through the meeting. What happened?
Well, they were all there. So I had rung the head of Sony Studio to say, "Would you please make sure that Ted Sandros is in the room?" I mean, we thought he probably would be, but I wanted to double check that he would be because. We hadn't met Ted Sandros at this point, but Cindy Holland and Ted Sandros were the 2 people we had to have in the room. You gotta always get the bosses in the room.
They're the decision makers.
They're the decision makers. There's no point in going punting to people who aren't make the decisions. It's just a waste of time.
So this is good advice for people who want to get things
absolutely.
done. You
can't always secure it, but you've got to do your best.
You've got to try.
Yeah, and it was my job to make sure they were in the room. That's
the
what
producer.
I'm there for. So I'm sort of pitching. It's Peter is really pitching. Peter's on the line here. It's Peter's script. It's Peter's idea. It's his script. Stephen is a brilliant director, but he's always going to get work as a director, and I'm obviously the person who's going to make sure it's all going to happen. But I have to make it happen. This is the key point, the selling point. This is when I really have to.
This is when you have to deliver.
Yes, absolutely vital. And this is actually, I have to be honest with you. I love this moment. I do love selling, but it's hairy and it's not terrifying, but it is terrifying if you fail. It's just anyway, we didn't.
What happened? So why did it work? Why did it work on the last day? Yeah,
it was they literally bought it in the room. I mean, Ted said, "This is fantastic." We sort of discussed it, and they asked a couple of questions, and Ted said, "This is fantastic. We want this. This is great." We were like, I mean, I literally can't.
You're a little bit surprised, but not showing it.
And Peter said, and he said to Peter, "Have you got any questions?" And Peter said, "I don't want any notes." And Ted said, "That's fine, Peter. No notes." And so what, they're picking up $100 million worth, and there's going to be no notes? I mean, it's unreal.
Right.
And I met someone recently who
So when you
said,
say no notes, what's that mean?
well, because when writers hand in their scripts, they normally get piles of executive notes back saying, I don't like, what about this bit, what about that?
Oh, so you've got no notes. And I didn't know that's what you meant.
Yeah, no,
that's so
what I
interesting.
meant. So Peter was very excited.
So you just got exactly what you wanted, really.
Pretty much, yeah. And I met
But
someone recently.
that's probably why it was so good.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I think Peter would argue that's absolutely it. There was there was a lot of support, but no interference, which was a different thing.
yeah.
But I met someone recently who said, I remember I was seeing you, Andy, on a plane coming back from your Netflix meeting where you sold The Crown. He said you were just literally so happy. You were just bouncing around the aeroplane.
I bet you were. So that was the beginning of what turned out to be a pretty incredible journey.
It's an incredible journey. And of course, what we realized in the fullness, in time, was that we were in the right place at the right time, that Netflix had already decided that at that time we were selling, Netflix were only in the UK, the US, and a bit of Scandinavia. That's all. Nothing else. But they had obviously planned their global rollout, and they were looking for
really good content.
Yes, and content with IP, as this mysteriously much-used phrase, IP, intellectual property. And you can't get a much better piece of British IP than the royal family, to be honest with you. I mean, that's a bit crude, but it's true. It's true. So it was perfect for all English-speaking territories. Everyone was familiar with the Queen. So, it was great, and they were very good to their word. The money was not a problem. The support system was fantastic. They took incredible time and care to launch the show properly, and we were at the vanguard of something amazing, which was global television. I mean, suddenly, instead of making shows that just dropped in Wakefield and Warrington and Wilmslow. They're dropping in, Angola and
Wyoming and Wichita.
Yeah, I mean,
somewhere else.
Suddenly you were going, you were being told that 30 million people have been watched it this week around the world. 30 million, that sort of thing. I mean,
that's very satisfying. Yeah,
it was just a wholly different thing, and we had these global drop dates. November the 27th, the Crown drops around the world, wherever you are. I mean, this is just extraordinary.
This is a new form of television.
I mean, the whole television has totally changed. At the 50 years I've been working in television, from those humble days of, writing trailers for Granada Television through to kind of having global television shows drop. Unbelievable. I mean, and of course, the show grew exponentially with Netflix growth, so the figures of the show just go up and up and up and up and up and up, as did the budget. But the budget needed to, in a sense.
So the budget went up. So you wanted to do cinematic television.
Yes.
This was the sort of exemplar of that.
It was.
And so how much did you get to per episode? You started off at 5.
Yes. Well, it doubled, basically.
It doubled. So you were spending $10 million an episode for the last...
Pounds, I think, actually.
Pounds? That's $14 million, almost $13 million.
We weren't desperately out of line with a lot of... I mean, Game of Thrones and all that. I mean, it wasn't the most expensive.
Game of Thrones is a huge production.
Yeah. I mean, there are other television shows which are more expensive than The Crown, many of them, and mostly American, actually. But I think for the UK, we were extraordinary. I mean, it was the first UK television show that had that sort of global success, and and we were able to use the best of British crews, the best of British actors. I mean, there were so many pluses about it. It was an amazingly beautiful journey for 10 years, actually, to do thought. I mean, no television shows without its problems and its challenges. There were, of course, plenty of those along the road, but it was an incredible experience.
Well, one interesting sort of, I think it popped up as a challenge periodically, was writing a drama about people who are living people.
Yeah.
And sort of how they might react, or
well, you can't libel them though. It's pretty straightforward. If you libel them, you're going to be in trouble. So, all the Crown scripts are very carefully legal. We never libel people. We never say things that we can't support. It's very carefully researched. I mean, of course, it's all imagined. Of course it is. But Peter's very, very clever, and I think his understanding of family drama, because that's what it is essentially. And the creation of those characters are pretty close to...
I think an interesting consequence that I think many people didn't see is that the royal family, or particularly the Queen, ended up more popular after the Crown than she was at the beginning of it.
No doubt there was a huge impact.
But a really positive one for the royal family.
Yeah. The Queen had the same thing, actually, by the way, the movie. The same thing is that prior to, post Diana and all that stuff, the Queen was at quite a low ebb in terms of popularity, as was the royal family generally. But the Queen, the movie, really turned it round.
So,
which was ironic because they were very suspicious of the movie being made, and when we were trying to film it, we were essentially banned from everywhere in Scotland, apart from anything that was owned by British people. It was a bit of a no go. We had to go to the old Scandies, who own quite a bit of Scotland these days.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it changed once the movie came out, but initially, I mean, I understand that there were people.
So the man from Left Bank sort of did good for the royal family, as it turned out. As an irony.
Yeah.
That's you're smiling.
Quite, James. Exactly. I didn't say left. I didn't say I was a Republican, James.
No, that's good. Well, you're clearly not.
No, I'm not.
So then, taking the story forwards, now you're sort of, you mentioned you're thinking about changing moving from CEO to executive chairman. That's something
I think
you mentioned before.
Look, I've had a fantastic ride. We've done a lot of great shows, and we're still doing a lot of great shows. We got Department Q and This City Is Ours, our two big hits this last 12 months, and that's great. But I did, for the last year or so, started to think. I mean, Sony fully own the company now, and that's a really good thing. We've gone on a journey, and our success has been underwritten and supported by Sony, and they continue to be very incredibly helpful in tougher times with distributing the shows, so that our ambition and their ambition remains aligned. So that's all good. But I did sort of feel increasingly, maybe the next 5-10 years, I could spend my time being on more creative projects rather than actually running the company. And I don't say that I think running the company is fantastic, but I've done it, and I've done it pretty well, I hope. I mean, we made a lot of money for everybody for 18 years. And so I decided to talk to Sony about stepping away, not stepping off or not retiring, and not stepping away from the company completely, but taking a different role, a sort of... it's called executive chair. I mean, and it's part-time. It's non-exclusive, but it allows me to stay across 2 or 3 of the shows that I've always been invested in, and to support our new CEO, who's Charlotte Moore, who's come in from the BBC, and to play perhaps a wiser old man sort of type role. I don't know what that means exactly.
So it's a transition in a way. But you obviously like the creative work.
I do, but I also think that knowing when to get off the train is as important as knowing when to get on the train, in a sense. And I have thought a lot about it, and I've read quite a lot about it, and thought quite a lot about it. And I just didn't want to be that person where people go, oh, he's sort of lost it, or he can't be bothered anymore, or he's not in touch with the new trends or thoughts or writers or what have you. I mean, television is an endlessly, swiftly moving business. You've got YouTube, you've got AI, you've got all these things affecting it and changing it and challenging it. And I think that's great. And Left Bank needs to be absolutely there to meet those challenges and work out for the next 5 years. Sony expect that, they want that, they need that. And a 5-year plan is something that that's somebody younger and more energetic, and maybe coming in from a different position, maybe managing it in a different way. It's got to be a good thing.
They might be younger, but I suspect it'd be hard to be more energetic.
Well,
I'm seeing you now.
I've
hearing your stories.
The energy's going to be still there.
You've got plenty of that. Yeah, so that is definitely apparent to me. But I feel our conversation's coming towards an end. Have you got anything in production at the moment you want to float or tell us a little bit about? Just so it might be interesting to our listeners.
Well, I've had quite a long relationship with James Graham, the writer, who I think is absolutely...
So what's James Graham written for people who maybe don't know who he is?
Well, his current...
Quite a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of good stuff, yeah. James Graham has written Dear England, which is the very successful play about Gareth Southgate. That is our current project, because we're turning that play into a 4-parter for the BBC, and we're right in the middle of that now, and it's going out next May on BBC. And
could you change the end so England wins?
Yes, we can't change the end. No, we can't change the end, but we have got Thomas Tuchel in it. So we
like Super Thomas Tuchel in this part of town.
I also did Quiz with James, which was another highly successful play about the millionaire who wants to be a millionaire.
Right.
Was
the one that coughed?
The coughing major.
Yes.
That was great fun. And we got some other projects with James. I mean, James, like Peter Morgan, is just an incredibly exciting writer who wants to make sense of the modern world, the British world, and that's what really interests me. I'm a British producer, and I like to make stuff about the UK. mean, it's what interests me, and I think it's what interests other people actually beyond the UK. If you're making shows that are intrinsically British, they get it, they understand it, and they really enjoy it. So,
well, that's so good to hear, because we get to consume a lot of stuff from America.
We do.
So we need to have British producers producing really.
But the
good
demand
work.
for British stuff is very good. I mean, I didn't
Seems
make
to be.
Adolescence. I wish I had done, but I mean, look at that. That is, in many senses, quite a small piece, but its impact has been huge. Why? Because it's about something which you can relate to wherever you are in the world. You know,
Yes.
the anxieties over the internet and teenagers, etc., etc., etc. It's brilliantly written, it's beautifully performed, and it's UK at its absolute best. And I think there is no doubt that in this country we have a fantastic television and film industry. We're very, very good. We have fantastic technicians and great story makers. As with musicians, we've always had a long run of people who make great music, and similarly we have great artists who make great television, and that's something we've got to look after and nurture and preserve.
Cultivate and encourage.
And a healthy BBC is certainly one of the most important ways to doing that.
Well, that's very topical.
Well, I passionately believe in the BBC. I think it's, I fear a terrible, I don't think this will happen, but I fear a sort of, that the BBC could befall, like Brexit, something that happens without people really fully realising the consequences and understanding the consequences and then living with the consequences afterwards. I really hope that happens. I don't think it will happen, actually, because I think too many people understand and love what the BBC can offer. And I'm not trying to get away from all the controversy over the news division, but I think in every aspect of our life, the BBC is a huge important, and it's what makes us, very unique in the world. Nobody else has a standalone, publicly funded.
Well, so much great content that they produce.
But that's where we develop new talent there as well. Else. I mean, the future of our industry is going to depend on having something which is intrinsically British and about British talent.
Well, I should declare my hand here. I once worked at the BBC, Andy, and I agree with what you just said. I always ask two questions at the end, all of my guests that I'm going to fire at you, Andy. The first question is, what gets you up on a Monday morning?
What gets me up on a Monday morning? Well, what day is today? It's Tuesday today, isn't it, actually? I have become fanatical about exercise. So the answer is really very simple. I mean, one of my 3 or 4 trainers.
You've got a team of trainers.
I've got a team of trainers. I have rather more than I need, and one or two I just can't quite lose because I like them, and the other two they're trying different things. But I'm being a bit silly. I mean, some of them are in videos, some of them are
So you get up. What time do you get up to do that?
6. I get up at 6:30 every day, and then I train for an hour. Right. So I do different things. I do Pilates. I do.
I did that today as well.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it's being fit. So
weightlifting.
Important.
I did weightlifting today. It was great. I mean, I'm not trying to. Everybody knows the advantages of keeping fit, and I've always kept fit, but I'm much more fanatical about keeping fit now. It gives me the energy. It makes me sleep better.
Yeah.
So and the other thing, I suppose, it's at the same time my head is always full of ideas. It is, what's whatever project I'm mulling, is in my head, and I'm starting to reach for a podcast or a piece of paper or something. I've got obsessed about making a film about Led Zeppelin at the moment, which will only mean something to people over 40. But
Stairway to Heaven.
It's a great story. It's a great band, but it's a great story, and it hasn't. It's never really been told. Anyway, it doesn't.
Please do it. I'd like to watch that.
But there's always it's not quite an idea of the week, but I mean there is an endless surfeit of stuff, and I find that the idea that stays with me, and I can't quite let it go, then it's for real. Then I've really got to give it a crack. Music things are particularly hard, actually, to be truthful, for many reasons, rights and the personality of people involved in bands and stuff like that. But I mean, they are popular if you can get it right, So yeah.
Well, good luck with that. And my last question, Andy, from my book,
James.
Why You? 101 Interview Questions You'll Never Fear Again, is where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Well, I hope, that's 5 years, that's interesting. I hope that I've got a small coterie of much the same as I intend to be from January onwards, actually. I teach a little bit in the National Film School, and I'm on the board of the National Film School, so a little bit of putting back, which I really enjoy, apart from anything else. A little bit of curating and producing projects or mini-series that really excite me, and with writers that I really admire, and a fair bit of enjoying myself in walking and sailing and holidaying with.
Get a bit of time outdoors.
Bit of time out. I do like travelling. I must be honest.
I hope Department Q will carry on. I
think Department Q was definitely carry on. It's a fantastic show, and I'm very proud of it, of my involvement in it. But I mean, it was Scott Frank, who wrote and directed, is really properly talented, and doing it in Edinburgh was really great. I brought. I've helped to bring a couple of shows to Scotland, and that's given me great pride, to be honest. I mean, I'm all for encouraging.
Because we should say you were born in Inverness.
I was born in Inverness, and so I feel my Scottish roots quite. My mother's passed, but she, I wore a kilt till I was 12.
Oh, good for you. So, I hope some of the time in the future will take you back to Scotland.
Exactly.
Thanks for coming in to talk to me, Andy. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, James.
I've really enjoyed it.
I've really enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Thank you.